Hey, if you feel like your body changed overnight and your metabolism ghosted you, and you feel like your joints ache out of nowhere, or your period has suddenly gone off the rails, chances are your estrogen is behind the scenes pulling the strings that you didn't even know existed. Welcome back to the Hormone Shift Show. My name is Leslie Duffy, and in this episode, I am walking you through 10 things every woman over 40 should know about estrogen, and more importantly, what you can do about it. Okay, so imagine this. I am sitting in my naturopath's office. It is a regular appointment visit. I had started seeing her because things weren't adding up for me, even though I had gone to my regular doctor. It's this gorgeous aesthetic. It's such a sensory experience. You can imagine a whistling tea kettle, plants oxygenating the air, and this incense that's just divine. This is back before the pandemic, so we're face to face, and she pulls up a chair and she tells me, Leslie, you're estrogen dominant. And that's what's causing your weight gain and why you can't lose weight. And at this point in my life, I've got kids. I'm still a stay-at-home mom. This is, several years ago. And I felt like a complete idiot. And I'm like, I don't even know what this is. What is estrogen? What is happening? Why is this causing weight gain for me? And she explains, well, you have insulin resistance. It was a gut check in a way. I said, well, what is that? And she tried to explain it. It didn't make sense. I had to look it all up. It was a lot of work on my end because I didn't even have the time to look it up. But what's important is that the feeling that I left there feeling like foolish for not knowing what it was and thinking that I needed to know more and more about my body. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode is that this is a way for you to advocate for yourself. When you walk into your doctor's office, they're going to be speaking a language that you might not even understand, and you don't even get it. And a lot of women, we're very busy. I even had an interview, I'm not going to say who it is, but she didn't know if she was in menopause. And that can happen when you're on birth control for a very long time, or you've had any sort of procedure. You don't know if you're in menopause. And so these things we need to start knowing about ourselves so that you can start to advocate for yourself. Later on, I'm going to do an episode on hormone replacement therapy, and that will kind of tie it all in together. But for today, let's talk about the 10 things that you should know about estrogen as a woman over 40, and let's get started. All right, so the first thing you need to know is that there are 3 types of estrogen. The first one is the main one that I'm going to tell you. Even though it's called E2, it's estradiol. And that's the main estrogen when you are a cycling female. The second one I'm going to tell you is E3, which is estriol, and that's dominant during pregnancy. That's what kind of takes over during your pregnancy. And estrone, E1, is the weaker form of estrogen, and that's more common after menopause. So as we can see, we have E1. Now, estrogen dominance, like my experience in the doctor's office, that happens very early in perimenopause. And that can happen because it's relative to whether or not you are actually ovulating. And it's opposed by progesterone. So estrogen and progesterone, which is one of my steps where I'm actually going to be repeating myself. Estrogen and progesterone is on a seesaw with each other. Progesterone keeps estrogen in check. And if you're not making enough progesterone, estrogen is going to go sky high. And it might not even be that you have sky high estrogen. It just means that you don't have enough progesterone to keep the estrogen symptoms in check. So, symptoms of high estrogen would include heavy bleeding, breast tenderness, bloating, mood swings, and headaches. Okay, now let's talk about some action steps. We want to be tracking your cycle, even if it's not very regular. Not everyone experiences estrogen dominance in the same way. You will likely experience estrogen dominance, and whether or not you're aware of it or not, that's entirely up to your makeup. We shall see, but we want to start tracking symptoms that you're experiencing during what time of your cycle. We want to pay attention to PMS signs like that breast tenderness, the irritability, the heavy flow, and that can be early estrogen dominance clues. Okay. And we want to also, in this stage, prioritize stress management and consistent sleep. And the reason is because the high stress hormone cortisol, like remember, cortisol is that stress hormone. Stress is going to trigger the stress hormone cortisol, which makes low progesterone states worse. and it amplifies your estrogen dominance symptoms. Okay. So even though today we're talking mostly about estrogen, we are talking about how progesterone and estrogen kind of keep each other in check. All right. The second thing you want to know about estrogen is that it keeps you juicy. It's the juicy hormone. Estrogen keeps your skin plump and your joints comfortable and your vaginal tissue healthy. When it starts to decline, now you're going to start getting probably maybe some vaginal dryness or maybe some achy joints. You might notice your skin is changing. It's a little bit more wrinkled. These are your action steps. Now, if you're noticing vaginal dryness, you want to talk to your provider about having a localized vaginal estrogen, which will help keep your vaginal tissue lubricated. And that's actually very important. I'm going to tell you why, not only for sex. We also want to support your skin and your tissue, your skin tissue with omega-3 fatty acids like fish, flax seeds, chia, fish oil. Make sure that you're having adequate protein, which will also contain some fatty foods. And we also want to use some gentle pH balanced products to avoid irritating your vaginal tissue. It's extremely fragile and we don't want to push it right down there. We want to use some water-based lubrication because it's so fragile that you could tear the vaginal tissue. So just be very, very careful when you are deciding to become intimate. Moving on. Estrogen protects your joints and your ligaments. Now, estrogen helps to increase the collagen content of your skin. It also stimulates and supports collagen in your connective tissue. And when you have less estrogen, you will definitely have more joint pain, stiffness, and less flexibility. The other thing I want to mention in the joints and ligaments juiciness, number 3, is that estrogen makes bones degranulate faster. So it is a natural cycle for our bones to degranulate and then build up. That's actually a natural cycle. Our bones are always turning over. However, it can become a little bit faster when you're losing estrogen because estrogen kind of keeps that process in check. It doesn't make it go so fast. And bone loss is incredibly common for women as a risk factor for early death. So we want to really focus on maintaining healthy bones. So some of the things that you want to do in order to do that is phytoestrogens. So phytoestrogens are foods that are weaker estrogens. And I'm going to link a study. It actually helps you decrease inflammation in your joints and it helps to decrease the speed at which your bones degranulate. Also, another thing that I always tell my clients is to make sure that you're having vitamin D with vitamin K2. K2, it prevents bone loss by activating bone-building cells, and it works in conjunction with vitamin D when you pair it together. And that's very, very important, especially in early menopause, perimenopause, and it will help to keep your bones nice and strong. So if you have not already discussed that with your provider, go ahead and do that. It's really important that we do everything to protect our bones at this stage. Okay, other action steps for keeping your joints and your ligaments nice and flexible would be to strength train regularly to protect your joints and your bones. If you do any strength training exercises, the pressure from the muscles on the bone signals the bone to get stronger. So it's super important. And you want to support your collagen production with nutrients like vitamin C, zinc, and of course protein. And you also want to prioritize recovery after a workout. After you do anything, make sure that stretching, and make sure you warm up before you work out. Make sure you stretch after you work out and make sure that you're sleeping well and incorporating those rest days. We're at number 4 now. Okay, number 4, low estrogen affects vaginal and bladder health. So low estrogen means that the thinner tissue, like we talked about in the vaginal walls and the urethra, can cause this dryness. It can cause painful sex. It can cause UTIs, urgency, leakage, and even prolapse. So I'm going to tell you that this would even apply to older women. My own mom needed to get some support. Now, you might have a mom who could be struggling with a similar issue. Highly recommend that they see somebody who would be willing to support the tissue in that area and Estrogen would be one way to do it. Another way is to have some sort of regimen with some nutraceuticals. I actually put my own mom on a regimen of nutraceuticals to help prevent E. coli, which is one of the main offenders with UTIs, to prevent that from building up in her bladder. So in the show notes, I will give you a cheat sheet of everything that we're talking about. And if you message me, I will send you the regimen that I give my own mom. And you can do that at leslie@thehormoneshiftshow.com. And so anyway, I put her on a regimen. She is doing much better. She does not have as often as UTIs. I mean, she was getting it every week. It was horrible. Twice a month even. Okay, number 5. Estrogen helps to maintain a healthy metabolic rate. Now, as you know from the introduction, I was estrogen dominant, causing some insulin resistance. So it's almost like a Goldilocks hormone. You want it just right. You want the right size estrogen for what you're trying to achieve. And in my situation, I had too much estrogen, unopposed by progesterone, because it was early perimenopause. And as that happens, estrogen supports your metabolism. It supports insulin sensitivity. And when it drops, you're more likely to have that belly fat, your metabolism can slow down, your insulin resistance shows up. Now, if you're wondering what is insulin resistance, go back to episode 1. I actually went through that. I told you all about it. It's easier to understand if you get some metaphors or analogies, and that's what I do in episode 1. Okay, so here are your action steps for number 5. We want to eat enough protein at breakfast, especially at breakfast. Now we're supporting our metabolic rate. Estrogen is going to spike and drop throughout your perimenopausal years. However, you're going to be better supported if you have good nutrition. Now, you want to eat that protein at breakfast. You want it to be savory. You want to really prime your circadian rhythm with a nice morning breakfast within 2 hours of waking up. We also want to build muscle with strength training to help you protect your metabolic rate. Now, that's another good reason to do strength training for women. And as we said before, it protects your bones. We also want to manage sleep and stress because they directly impact insulin sensitivity. So if you have a bad night's sleep, you're going to be more insulin resistant. Your body is going to probably also seek out more snacks to try to keep you awake, probably a little bit more caffeine, which gets your cortisol level up. So again, this is that cycle. Let's go into number 6. As we already stated, I'm just going to go into a little bit deeper. Estrogen and progesterone balance each other out. Estrogen leads up to ovulation. It's the hormone that triggers ovulation. And we want to support progesterone naturally. I'm going to do a totally other episode on progesterone, but just know right now that you want to support your progesterone naturally through stress reduction and consistent sleep. As progesterone would be that nice and chill hormone. So progesterone is only made after you ovulate. And if you don't ovulate, you don't produce progesterone. And without it, estrogen has no balance. It doesn't have anything to kind of rein it in. And we get more of those estrogenic symptoms. And this is why perimenopause can feel so incredibly unstable. Ovulation becomes less predictable and progesterone production starts to wane. It's also a very fragile hormonal state for women. Stress can make it even harder to ovulate because high cortisol signals to the body to conserve energy and shuts down reproduction. And the result is that even less progesterone, which worsens the estrogen-dominant symptoms like heavy bleeding and mood swings and breast tenderness, can kind of go a little haywire. Here are your action steps for number 6, the estrogen-progesterone seesaw balance, is that you want to protect your ovulation as long as possible. So really prioritize that stress management, the yoga, the walking, meditation, and breath work. And if you need help in that realm, I highly recommend you get some help in that. Go to your yoga classes. There's a lot of resources on YouTube, and there's even resources in my own program, the Wellness Shift. You also want to maintain consistent sleep. Sleep hygiene is huge, and that will support your hormone balance. Number 7 is Estrogen decline in perimenopause is not a steady decline. It's not a gentle decline. It is a roller coaster. Estrogen does not fade out into the sunset. It spikes and then it crashes, and then you have these swings that can drive up your perimenopause symptoms. That's like all those PMS symptoms. It can cause estrogen states 3 times as high as you're normally used to. So it's like your ovaries are having a grand finale. It's that fireworks show where at the end of the fireworks show, they throw everything up in the air. That's kind of like what's happening with your ovaries. So that is very, very common. And that's, if you could think of it that way, it's like that final fireworks show. And these are your takeaways. You want to, again, track your symptoms. I keep telling you this, and I hope that this is sinking in. I do have a tracker for you. So I will link that in the show notes as well. And even if it's irregular, it doesn't matter that it's irregular. We are tracking symptoms because then we know what our hormones are doing. We want to avoid quick fix diets and fasting extremes. I am telling you, fasting is not a friendly thing for women in perimenopause. That's going to worsen your hormonal swings. You also want to support your liver and your gut with steady meals, steady fiber. Okay, number 8, high estrogen means PMS, migraines, breast tenderness, and bloating. Again, these are all of those estrogen dominant symptoms, but especially when progesterone is low, and it's going to lead to more PMS symptoms. Now, if you have a history of PMS symptoms, you're likely going to have more PMS symptoms as you go through perimenopause. Some women don't get perimenopausal symptoms or even PMS. So don't compare yourself. There's nothing wrong with you. When I was at my doctor's office and my doctor told me, well, you're estrogen dominant, immediately I compared myself to my best friend, Tracy, who is, and mind you, I'm 5'2", and she's like 5'10". And I always compare myself to my 5'10" friend who is skinny and very athletic, and I am obviously not. So don't compare yourself to your best friend. Don't compare yourself. This is your body, and we are learning how to support your body. So some action steps if you are more likely to be in PMS in your cycling years. You want to really protect yourself now in your perimenopausal years by making sure that you ease into this PMS with some magnesium. Make sure that you're getting enough vitamins, especially the B vitamins, cutting out alcohol and the processed carbohydrates, which is also going to worsen your symptoms. We want to support your ovaries naturally, and there are certain ways to do that, of course. With nutraceuticals, you want to go with a trained provider in this instance. I know that a lot of us ladies like to go on TikTok or Instagram to get the latest trends on supplements. I really don't recommend that. I think you should definitely speak to your own provider and get what you need based on your genetic makeup. And I do that for my clients. So that's something we talk about in the Wellness Shift. Okay, so let's go on to number 9. Number 9, estrogen increases histamine and lowers DAO. And I'm going to tell you what all that means. Think about when you have an allergy attack. That's what histamine is. It brings blood flow to an area. So imagine your nose getting really swollen and your nose starts running and you start sneezing, and it also causes like bronchial constriction, so you might start wheezing, and it causes itchiness, so hives, classic histamine. So estrogen is very common to cause a histamine response in perimenopausal years because of the fluctuating estrogen. Now, estrogen makes mast cells. Imagine a little cell, and that is called a mast cell, and it holds histamine inside. Now, estrogen makes that mast cell very fragile. So it's like a balloon that pops easily. And so when your estrogen is causing these fragile mast cells, it releases more histamine. So you might find yourself, they call it perimenopause allergies. You might find yourself more allergic to things, more sensitive to things. Estrogen releases DAO, which is an enzyme in your gut. Now, DAO is the enzyme that helps you flush histamine out of your body and break it down to get rid of it. So you might have histamine in your body a little bit longer. And so that is super common. A lot of my clients are dealing with a lot of that. I myself, we are at a summer house right now, and I suddenly developed allergies to I don't even know what at this house, but something in this house is making me sneeze quite a bit. Even things like migraines is a histamine response, and that increases during your cycle. So if you're likely to get a migraine during certain times of the month, this is a histamine response. It also causes diarrhea. So if you're like the kind of person that gets that perimenopausal diarrhea or like the PMS diarrhea right before your period, that is a histamine response. And it also causes sinus issues and things like that. So I think that this is one of the biggest ahas of all of them, and we're at number 9. But I could actually do an entire episode on histamine. But here's what you want to do. Track your symptoms. Again, my friend, you want to track your symptoms related to your cycle or lack. Even if you don't have a cycle, still track. Like, hey, this is what's happening. I suddenly started itching. I suddenly got hives. I suddenly got a migraine. And this is why you want to really track your food around that time too. There are histamine foods. So there are some foods that contain more histamine and very difficult for the body to clear if you are in a histamine overload. So things like wine, aged cheese, or fermented foods are the biggest offenders, even a banana. So you want to be tracking that. And the other thing that would also support and promote histamine clearance is to improve your gut health, because the DAO enzyme, the enzyme that clears histamine from your body, is made in your small intestine. Okay, those are all really good things. All right, we are at the last one. This is, I think, might even be the most important thing that you need to know about estrogen, is that it has to be cleared. It's not just that we make estrogen, but we also have to clear it out of the body. And this is extremely important because, as we know, estrogen cancers happen because of, like, breast cancer, for example, is an estrogen type of cancer. And in many ways, we can probably link the clearance of estrogens to something like this. Now, here's what you need to know. The liver detoxifies estrogen. That's number 1. And number 2 is that the gut eliminates it. So the liver is going to put your estrogen in a nice little package with a beautiful bow and then escort that estrogen out of the body through your bowel movements. And if either system is sluggish, you have a slow, sluggish liver, maybe you have a little bit of liver congestion, very common. Estrogen can not be cleared as often. If you drink alcohol, your body is going to prioritize clearing alcohol instead of clearing your estrogen and detoxifying your estrogen. That's why there is that huge link between alcohol and breast cancer. We also want to make sure that you have good, steady bowel movements. Any sort of constipation is going to cause that pretty little package that's wrapped up in a little bow, and within the colon area, it's going to get, there's an enzyme that will take the ribbon off the bow and let the gift out of the package, and then you end up reabsorbing your estrogen. So you end up recycling what you work so hard to actually detoxify. So this is that loop. So make sure that you're having regular bowel movements, that your estrogen is being excreted through bowel movements, that you make sure you're having at least 25 to 35 grams of fiber per day. And that would be with things like chia, flaxseed, vegetables. Have those regular bowel movements. We don't want to recycle our estrogen with constipation. And we also want to limit alcohol. In the anti-inflame handout that I have on my website, I will also link it in the show notes. We want to limit alcohol, but I have these mocktail recipes that you can use. And so that is in that handout. So if you'd like to check that out, you can start to limit your alcohol by swapping out those mocktails instead. Because if you actually have an alcoholic drink, you're not going to be prioritizing estrogen detoxification. You can't do both at once. Okay. And on another show, we're going to go over endocrine disruptors like plastics, receipts, and fragrances. All of those also affect your estrogen levels, but we're not going to talk about that today. Pretend you didn't hear that. Okay. So, my friend, that is your education, estrogen education for today. No white coats, no shame because you didn't know this. It's totally okay. I want you to remember that estrogen is not just about periods. I didn't even mention it, but Because estrogen is known as that juicy hormone, it also keeps your blood vessels nice and supple, which is such a high link between heart health and estrogen. So keep that in mind as well. So it impacts your skin, your joints, your metabolism, your long-term health, your heart health. All of these things are super important. So I hope that it resonates with you. And if it does, share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And don't forget that you get a free estrogen cheat sheet waiting in the show notes and all the other things that I mentioned as well. All right, my friends, stay curious, stay empowered, and as always, stay juicy. I'll see you next time.